I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on. Well, it's Monday, and Monday is Mailbag. We've survived the weekend, and it's time for your questions. I'm here with Niko Maldonado.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
And we are going to be starting off with a little bit of this or that. We've got a couple of questions forwarded from the field. Of course, we're going to be taking your questions live, so though we have talking points, we are all too eager to toss them aside. But before I do that, I do want to say that if you don't have the time, you're pressed for time, or you're sneaking furtive glances at your phone in between patrols from the office foreman, we have a new Watch You Want Watch Reviews channel where my old style on-the-wrist reviews can be seen in 5 to 7 minute increments. It's the best way to get your watches on the fly and in short, intense doses. So Niko, let's play this or that Hublot 2017 edition. That's right, folks. I said Hublot, the bête noire of the watch world, is here, and it's a family feud. So, Niko, here's the thing. At Basel World this year, and also kind of at SIHH, because the LVMH pirate ship was standing by while we went to the Richemont benefit, Hublot launched the Big Bang Sapphire, red sapphire. 250 pieces, full sapphire case, really red. So not only is it like last year's Big Bang Sapphire, but it's almost like a furious fuchsia type color. If you know your muscle cars, you know what I'm talking about. So this watch, and by the way, they also made a blue sapphire version, or the Big Bang Meca 10 Full Magic Gold. Now this is last year's 10-day power reserve, Meccano or Erector set inspired Big Bang movement, but in magic gold. So it's the gold that's a little bit more bronze than gold, that's supposed to be effectively as hard as ceramic. So which of these two would you prefer to wear, knowing that we're both dress watch guys and we're both smaller watch guys?
Yeah, man, wow. You know, it's tough. Like you said, we're both kind of on the minimalist side, so it's like if I had to choose one, I mean, to me, the retail on the red sapphire is absurd. I mean, I'm not sure where they come up with it, but I mean,
it's $74,000
for this watch. In my right mind, I couldn't. But to me, the Meca 10 actually has somewhat of a decent look to it. Like you said, it's got a little bit of a bronzy feel to it. You know, it's supposed to be stronger. You know, I don't know what I would wear with it, but if I had to choose one, I think just overall, and based on the fact that that one retails at, I think, $34,000,
yeah,
it's just a little bit more conceivable. You know, that in a year or so could be something that you could get somewhat economically like other Big Bangs. So that would probably be my choice. What about you?
Yeah, I like the Meca 10 in full magic gold. For one thing, I love the fact that it's gold that really does look like bronze. It doesn't telegraph its goldness, if I could put it that way.
Sure.
It's a watch that legitimately looks the same tone as something like a Panerai Bronzo, and actually it's got about the same size as something like a Panerai Bronzo. But I have to admit that I kind of identify with the original idea behind the Meca 10 because they wanted to create a movement that was almost the look of an Erector set, Meccano if you're in Europe. And they did a great job of that, so the whole idea of a mechanical watch as a toy for big boys really kind of resonated with me in a way that most Hublots just never do. Plus, I'll mention this. The Meca 10 Full Magic Gold has like a legitimate water resistance, and if I'm wearing an Hublot, I want it to be a sports watch. I want to be able to just jump in the water and not worry about it. The Sapphire 5 ATM, it's a compromise you have to accept with that full sapphire case. 5 ATM is more of dress watch territory. So as a sports watch, as an Hublot, the Big Bang Meca 10 is both more appealing and more durable.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think that as far as an appeal from the wrist, it's got the most of the three.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how much that's saying, but it definitely has it. You know, and like you said, functionality is there. So, you know, for it to at least, you know, demand what it's asking as far as price-wise, yeah, I mean, I think that's the wisest choice.
So 250 pieces for each version of the new colored sapphires, 200 for the Meca 10 Full Magic Gold. And hey, there is a gee-whiz factor to the whole idea of gold that doesn't scratch. I've tested it. It's pretty tough stuff, so I can attest. Now, moving to questions tonight, Niko. Bob V asks, and this is an interesting one. This is about watch straps. Niko, what are your favorite materials for watch straps? Are there some that are better suited to sports and dress watches? And is it important to color coordinate dial or case metal to strap color?
Sure. I mean, I think that one of my favorite things about Panerai is that they kind of pioneered this, like, let's make it fun with straps. Like aftermarket is a huge thing with them. There's some other brands that I won't name names of, but that do aftermarket straps that make it really fun. So, to me, that's something great to go on. I don't think that you have to worry about color when it comes to the case, unless you have a colored dial. I mean, if you're dealing with a black dial, you can pretty much pair that with anything. You're dealing with a blue dial, silver dial, something like that, maybe you consider it. But as far as materials go, I've really liked the sailcloth. That IWC has done.
Yeah, IWC has done it. Blancpain's done it.
Right. Yeah, it's been a really nice thing to have. I think that it's something that can kind of be versatile, in the sense of being able to sport with it, and also have it look great on like the bathyscaphe, for instance. I know that doesn't come on that, but I mean, I'm just saying.
Oh yeah, but I mean, why wouldn't you?
Right. Exactly. Why wouldn't you put it on there? Leather's good, but it's limited. It's something that you have to take care of, and has to be a dress watch. So it's something that even if it's alligator or crocodile, whatever it is, it's something that that is going to be very limited to what you can do with it.
So now, just going back to what you said about dress watches, like I've got my own Master Ultra Thin 34. Unfortunately, it's got fingerprints on the crystal, but this is a lovely little watch. You're saying that it's really the dial color, not the case metal, that should be the foil to the strap color.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that it's something that goes from dial out, and that's where you're going to draw your attention to. So depending on what you do with it and what your goal is to achieve and where you're trying to get people's attention, that's the way I would focus it.
Okay, so for style purposes, the dial is going to be your key. Now, also, you mentioned a sports watch that leather, honestly, can stop you in your tracks, even if it's a legit sports watch.
Absolutely.
Take something like an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore. They're always on hornback alligator straps. Actually, it's been about a decade since the hornback started rolling out and becoming sort of the standard leather strap on the Offshore. But at the same time, the Offshore is a 100-meter screw-down crown, water-resistant watch, but you have to stop yourself short of jumping in with it because the strap just can't get wet, and it's not a cheap strap. Would you suggest just going in that case where there's no textile option, straight for like the factory rubber?
Yeah, I definitely would. I mean, I think a lot of the brands have gotten better over the last few years with their rubber straps. It's something that before you would get a rubber that would kind of start cracking and stuff like that, but some of the brands have really pioneered and gotten a lot better. So it's something that I would definitely, if you're going to consider sporting with your watch, whatever watch it is, consider adding a rubber strap.
Yeah, and I think the brands themselves have begun to acknowledge that, first of all, quick-release lugs are great things, and second, if you're going to have quick-release lugs, like take the new Vacheron Constantin Overseas family, the fact that so many of those watches come with the leather and the rubber strap, and you can swap them yourself, that's a great thing if you can get it, but if you have to make the decision, I would say just by default, keep your watch on a bracelet, a textile strap, or rubber if you have any inclination of using it as a true sports watch. So that would be our advice on that front. Now we have a question. Menno B asks, "Hi Tim, the Zenith Elite 6150 launched only a few years ago. That's true. It launched in 2015. When will these watches hit the secondary market?" Well, this is an interesting watch, Menno, because there was a rumor that the Elite was going away entirely before 2015. We already saw the Sellita SW300 as the Zenith Caliber 3000 start to filter out into the model line, and there were concerns that Zenith was going to focus on El Primeros for the watches it sells under its own name, and then shift a large proportion of its production over to the likes of Tag Heuer and Hublot. And the spirit of Big Bang that we have here proves that some of that did occur, but rather than phasing out the Elite, Zenith doubled down when collectors protested, and the 6150 was sort of a restatement of their confidence in the more modern of their two calibers. So the Elite went from being a movement designed in '94 with a 50-hour power reserve to a movement with twin mainspring barrels redesigned in 2015 with a 100-hour power reserve. A little bit unconventional, also available with silver dial, but blue or silver dial, 42mm stainless steel case, so it's on the large side for a dress watch, which it definitely is. But they have hit the secondary market. Niko, I know we've seen this watch in-house. They sell for about $4,000 to $4,500 on the secondary market.
Yeah, they do. It's something that I was glad to see got revitalized.
Yes.
We were all kind of afraid of this going away, and me and you have preached Zenith for a long time being on the show together. So, it's something that every time it comes in, I'm really liking it. I always, snap a picture and I know I've always got a few clients that are interested. So, if you do find one on the secondary market, we do get them from time to time. It's something that does go quickly because people are kind of recognizing that it's stayed and it's become another mainstay for them.
Yeah, so it's a good watch. I would say at its retail of $6,700, probably a little bit ambitious on Zenith's part.
Just a bit.
It's a little too cold for me with the silver dial. I really like the blue sunburst version of it. 42 again, that's borderline for a dress watch, but if you look at it as a standard watch, neither a sports watch nor a dress watch, it is steel. It works on those terms, and mechanically you're getting what you pay for. 100-hour power reserve, 5 ATM water resistance, automatic winding, really nice timepiece, and the perfect tonic for Zenith's Salida hangover. Now we have a question coming in for you from RM. This is in the live chat. Niko, IWC Portuguese chronograph or a Cartier Santos 100. So
Wow.
one's a very traditional chronograph and one of the longest running IWC
Yeah.
Portuguese references. And the Santos 100 has been around almost as long, since 2004. So do you go with the stridently non-round watch, or do you go with the very traditional Portuguese?
Yeah, for me, I think that I love Cartier. I think I've even preached that we should do a show on just why we should like Cartier.
That's coming.
You know, that's definitely coming. But for me, in this particular situation, I think I would have to go IWC just because of the fact that Cartier right now, if I were to get into a Santos 100, depending, IWC is just going to be the stronger one. Again, guys, remember I always look at stuff from a sales perspective. If I had to get out of it, like what's more popular? Am I going to be happy with it 5 years down the line? If I've got to stay with it. So IWC for me, it's going to be something that's going to be a little bit more reliable, have a little bit more usability, I think.
Okay.
You know, and be something that I can wear in more than one setting. The Santos 100, I think, kind of limits itself with its case style. You know, so it's something that I'm looking for a little bit more versatility in my watch.
Okay, it's a good thing that you mentioned that, because we have another question coming up a little bit later in the show about non-round watches. Okay, so in other words, Menno, if you're looking for this watch on the secondary market, they're available now. You can find them
Yes.
from gray sources, and you can find them genuinely pre-owned. So they're out there in both instances. Budget about $4,000 to $4,500 US. Now, Ralph S. asks an interesting question, because sleight of wrist I can definitely relate. But Niko, how big is too big for a wrist? Is there some kind of yardstick that you use to determine what fits and what doesn't? Conversely, how do you know when a wrist, or rather a watch, is too small for a wrist? So I guess let's start with too big. What's your yardstick for determining what fits?
For me, for too big, I mean, like we've said, I kind of wear stuff that some people would call too small, even
Sure.
on me. So, you know, but as far as me judging whether a watch feels too big, what I always kind of look at is whether it's on a strap or a bracelet. I kind of
Okay.
look at how it's going to fit around the wrist, you know, once you get past that parallel of the middle of the wrist.
At the edge of the wrist.
Right
how
at
it
the edge of the
wraps.
wrist. Right, exactly. So if a strap has a little bit of area in between, which I'm sure you could demonstrate with one of your watches, but I mean, if it has a little bit of area in between, it's going to be a little loose. Some people like to wear it in that fashion. For me, I understand a strap has to get worn in. That's
Yeah.
one thing. But if it still feels just a little bit too uncomfortable, or if I'm, you know, all the way to like the second to last or to the last setting on a strap, maybe it's just the fact that I need a smaller strap. But that's how I'm going to judge. As far as too big, to me, I like feeling that a watch has presence,
Sure.
but I don't like to feel as though it's commanding presence from me being the wearer. So if it's a little bit too heavy or top heavy, if it's going past the top of my wrist, that's something that I'm going to look at and go, this may just feel a little bit too big for my liking.
So now when you talk about going past the top of your wrist, you mean like having lugs that
Correct.
stick out across the wrist?
Exactly.
Almost like you've got a cantilever on each side of your wrist. I agree. I think that looks awkward, and from a practical standpoint, when you've got a strap that's projecting out that far,
Absolutely.
you've also got a lot of space between your wrist and the strap, so the watch is going to be moving,
Yeah.
and that's annoying.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, the other thing is a lot of these really huge pilot references, anything inspired by the B-er is a great example, a Breitling B50 or B55. These are designed to be worn, properly speaking, over some sort of aviation jacket or coveralls. So you're not really looking at a watch that was designed to be worn the way we wear watches on a bare wrist. Even a lot of vintage Panerai, it's amazing to think, but some of those watches were occasionally worn on biceps because they were so big. So a lot of times these very large, extreme style professional watches were envisioned to be worn in a way that, frankly, folks in an office never would. Now, for small watches, here's a watch that I've got. This is my Master Ultra Thin 34. It's helped out a couple of times tonight. But this is a watch that I like to wear for traditional sake. This is a 34mm men's dress watch. This is the kind of watch that you would have worn if you were a stylish gent on the Italian Riviera in like 1953. So, Niko, how do you judge too small? Is it a matter of personal taste?
For me, it is. I mean, I've worn 34 millimeters before, and I've liked them. But there are certain watches in that size to where I get them on the wrist, and they just don't have a substantial enough weight to them to, really carry on.
So too light is a bigger deal than too small.
Yeah, I think to me, too light is bigger than too small because small can make a statement.
True.
You know what I mean? So, on the earliest episodes, I came on here with a 26mm watch that I...
Your Movado, was
my
it?
Movado, yeah, that I played golf with. It's a course piece that, was popular back in the 90s, the museum, and, that's a watch that I liked because it was one of the first ones I got. It was something that I enjoyed and that I still have. In fact, my fiance wears that watch now. So that kind of tells you what today's, watch world thinks of a watch like that. So, but... I think that having a substantial feel to the watch as far as weight is concerned, if it fits you right, I don't think millimeter size is as much a detriment to being too small or too big as much as weight is.
Yeah, I've always said the man makes the watch, not the other way around. So if you've got the panache to pull off a small watch with kind of classical flair, go for it. I think what Niko's saying is he's more disturbed by the watch that's made out of forged carbon than he is by something like this. So I'm going to give you a wrist shot on my Master Ultra Thin 34. This is a 16 centimeter circumference wrist wearing a traditional 34mm dress watch. So I'm going to zoom out until I can get this on my macro camera. There you go. So that's what a very traditional watch looks like. For a lot of folks, that's already beyond the pale. That's too tiny. For me, I think the watch has a lot of character. This is where you will get into shooting wars with other watch enthusiasts, because while too big seems like a discussion we don't have anymore, people are just into oversized watches and they're here to stay. Too small is, I mean, that's fighting words right there when you say a watch is too small for someone. So interesting perspective, Niko. It's the weight of the watch.
Yeah, and I've seen, I saw that Just Heels in the chat just now, shout out to him, he's a good client of mine, was asking about the Piaget Polo S.
Yeah.
And since we're talking about dress watches, we're talking about something, that has some weight to it. I've tried this watch on. I think it's got a nice substantial feel. We are, to answer his question, are we seeing them hit the pre-owned market? Not in droves. I mean, it's not hitting really, really dramatically. There's not a ton
we've got one.
We do have one, which I actually needed to reach out to him about. But regardless, I think that watch has a lot of, really good qualities to it that people are enjoying now.
It's a good watch, but it wasn't an appealing watch to most folks new. The first pass at full retail, I think people were like, it's too much like certain Patek and Audemars Piguet references.
And if you go back to some of our earlier shows, somebody's going to call me out in the chat, I'm sure, for saying that exact thing.
Yeah.
Until I kind of saw one in the flesh and got one on my wrist, it does have those qualities physically. It does. I mean, you can't deny that. But the watch does have a really great feel to it. The movement that Piaget put in it is decent. It's a good performer. So I don't know that I'm stamping my name on it, but I don't hate the watch.
Okay, I can agree with that. I'm also going to throw this out, guys. In terms of how a watch fits, a lot of times bracelets, especially today, with everything having a solid end link that really traces the arc of the case and conforms, this Omega Seamaster 300 Master Coaxial, if I can get it on my macro camera, I certainly will. You can see there are a couple of different ways, there we go, to measure the span of this watch. And there's the lug-to-lug, which is about 48 millimeters, but then it grows by about another 5 millimeters across the wrist, solidly into the 50s because of the bracelet. So if you want to wear a sports watch commando style and put it on a NATO strap, it's actually going to fit a whole lot better if you're borderline to wear it than if it's on a full bracelet. And I also wanted to say, because Dominic Jr. commented, Tim needs a haircut, not used to seeing him with anything other than an officer's haircut. That's right. Everyone's telling me, all the women here are telling me, Tim, let it grow, Tim, let it grow, Tim, let it grow. And I'm just like, look, it's fun for about a week like this when it's all spiky, and then it becomes a chore. So guys, don't worry, I'm getting this crap cut down, and I totally forgot, and believe me, I apologize. Now I'm keeping it real.
It's funny that I've been watching the comments and it's like everybody's like, well, first the jacket, but now the sunglasses are in the shirt. This is ridiculous.
Fair enough.
So at least we got the glasses fixed.
Where they belong.
Where they belong, that's right.
Okay, so More questions filtering in, and okay, so Mateo M asks, so this is a Tim question, and appropriately enough, Mateo asks, I would like Tim to speak about the current line of JLC ultra-thin movements. These are the master ultra-thin movements, especially with regard to their robustness. I have read very good things about their build quality, but I'd like to understand how fragile they can be as opposed to, for instance, some AP or Patek Philippe movements that he believes need to be treated with care. Now, he understands none of them will be Submariner tough, so, your 31-35 movement over in that turnograph, you're not getting those in the high horology realm. But how close can they come? Can they be worn daily? So let's compare the Master Ultra Thins caliber 899. In general today, these little tiny manual wind ultra thin 34s, these are no longer the backbone of the Master Ultra Thin collection. Today they're powered by variants of the JLC caliber 899, itself an evolution of the older 889. So what's changed? Well, it's still a thin movement, 26 millimeters in diameter, 3.3 millimeters thick. And I should focus on the core features here. What's changed has been unidirectional winding rather than bidirectional, ceramic rotor bearings that are tougher and don't need to be lubricated, a free-sprung balance, which takes and holds a regulation and is more shock resistant than the old mobile index, and a double laser welded hairspring welded at the stud and the collet, so where it's attached to the regulator and where it's attached to the center, the balance. All of these features make the 899 much tougher than the old 889. For office use, you're not going to have a problem with any JLC caliber, nor will you have an issue with the Audemars and Patek calibers. But I will say this, if you feel like you're going to have to bash the watch even a little, first of all, ultra thins probably not the best choice, but the 899 is a tough everyday movement. However, JLC's caliber 975 and the Geophysic families, caliber 770 and 772, are much tougher than even the 899. Those are sports watch movements. The 975, the legendary Auto Tractor, it's a tank of a caliber that JLC developed for sports watches in the early 2000s. And the caliber 770 and the Geophysic and the 772 are deadbeat seconds versions with a new balance called Gyrolab, which is pretty cool, as well as just a slightly different aesthetic treatment than you'll see on the 899. But principally, it's the addition of the deadbeat seconds, the universal time, and the Gyrolab balance. Those are very tough. The 899 is okay, but if you have an inclination to wear a JLC unsympathetically, aim for one of the 975 Auto Tractors or 770 calibers. Now, Audemars Piguet, the caliber 3120 is their bread and butter automatic. It's what replaced the JLC 899 base in the Royal Oak offshore. So they went from the 899 to the 3120. What does it do well? Well, it's not a particularly thin movement. It's a lot thicker than the JLC 899, and with a full balance bridge, it also has a little bit more stability for the balance structure than the JLC. It's free sprung like the JLC, so it has resistance to shock, vibration, or bump-induced timing deviations, and it has a longer power reserve than the JLC, which is a nice refinement. It's also better finished, frankly, because it costs more, and Audemars Piguet designed it with display case backs in mind. Similarly, it has the ceramic rotor bearings like the JLC, but unlike the JLC, it winds in both directions, so you don't get that freewheeling that can cause audible noise and as well as a tangible wobble on the wrist. Now, Niko, I promise I'll be quick about this. Patek Philippe's caliber 324. Okay, since 2006, when this movement started to filter out into the mainstream Patek Philippe automatic references, it's Patek's central rotor automatic, to be distinguished from the 240 micro rotor. But today, it's a much more robust movement than it was in its previous guise as the 315. Today, the 324 has an anti-magnetic hairspring, something not found on any JLC movement, and also not found on the Audemars Piguet 3120. The Patek is as thin as the JLC, and like the JLC, it has a free-sprung balance on a single-sided balance cock, not a dual-anchored balance bridge like the AP. It's the biggest of these calibers, so it works the best with a display caseback at 27 millimeters across. It's fairly tough, and it's what you'll find in the Aquanaut and the Nautilus automatics, short of the complications like the 5712. But the bottom line is that none of these are beater calibers. I would say Rolex's 3135 is in a class by itself in that regard, followed shortly thereafter by your standard ETA 2824, 2892s. And then if I had to pick a high horology movement that gets close to those, JLC 975 Auto Tractor. But guys, any of those are appropriate daily wearers. The bottom line with all of those watches is you're unlikely to want to bash the watch containing any of those calibers. They only tend to go into high-end dress and haute de gamme sports watches, and I just don't see people beating the crap out of a Royal Oak Offshore. You know, no matter how aggressive the style, that's not the one you wear to, like, wash the dog or work on an engine block. I'm just saying.
I saw an interesting question come in that I want to get your opinion on because I have my own, but I'd love to hear yours. Nick Knack says, guys, why do the Squadra Reversos get no love? I'm interested in them, but don't want a dog. Also, I know you wrote that question 2 or 3 times. Thanks for being persistent because I wanted to get to it.
Yeah.
So, Tim, what do you think?
Well, interesting thing about the Squadra is that it came out in 2005, and the idea was we're going to build a Squadra for a young man. The thought was that a rectangular watch was not necessarily going to appeal to a younger clientele, and so the Squadra, which was bigger, more water resistant, often automatic, which was then extraordinarily uncommon in the Reverso world, it was introduced as a young man's Reverso with a sporting sensibility. And then, all of a sudden, the traditional Reverso became popular again. It caught fire in the mid-2000s, and it went from being sort of a cult classic to being one of JLC's mainstream sales pillars. So I would say the worst thing that ever happened to the Squadra was the traditional rectangular case Reverso, which just saw a huge revival after 2001, the 70th anniversary of the watch. It just started gaining a momentum that it never really lost. And I'll be honest, today the only Squadras that survive, and this is the ultimate irony, are the ladies' models. Because while the Squadra never really caught on with guys, for some reason, it struck gold with women. And even more than the Rendezvous collection, which JLC pushes so hard, the Reverso Squadra is like the ladies' watch from JLC today. Laws of unintended consequences.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, my answer is somewhat similar, but Mike B just hit it right on the head. The Squadra's too big. You know, the watch is a tank. And I think that had they made the watch in a similar size to a standard Reverso, it would have caught on a little better because of the fact that it would be a hardier material.
Yeah.
It would be rubberized. It would be something that at least was a wearable thing that could be, you know, used on a daily basis that didn't feel like it was taking over your wrist.
Right.
I've always really liked the watch as far as the Squadra is concerned. It's a really cool, you know, thing that Reverso did that's so different than the traditional feel you always get that me and you cherish. You know, it's something that totally, you know, revolutionized, in my opinion, what they were trying to do. So, you know, unfortunately, with the size, I could never wear one. And I think that's what happened to a lot of people.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was too big. Like, you look at the World Chrono, really cool watch, powerhouse watch, world time, vertical clutch, column wheel, chronograph, automatic winding, super neat. I mean, awesome timepiece, but just unwearable. It was the size of the Triptyque, and the Triptyque was designed to be contained in, you know, the Trilogy Vault, along with the Ibris Mechanica Grand Sonnery. It was a thing designed to be seen, not worn. The problem was, you could actually buy the Squadra World Chronograph, you just couldn't wear it. It was inhuman in its size, but I think there's a deeper problem here. The Reverso started life as a sports watch. It's not that today. There are other watches, even other JLCs in this kind of thin era for JLC sports watches. There are other JLCs that you can wear when you want to get wet or wild. And so the Squadra was both too big to wear and somehow undermined by the concept that we have today that the Reverso is a dress watch. And every attempt to turn the Reverso back into a dress watch, the Grand Sports in the late 90s, early 2000s, the Squadras in the mid to late 2000s, every attempt to revert the watch to a sporting reference kind of fails because it's moving against the tide. It's not what people want from a Reverso.
Yeah, and talking about square watches, we go into our next point, which is, you know, we had a question come in from Paul T, and he said, could you explain how non-round watches fit a wrist? Do they wear like round watches, or is it an effective bigger or smaller case than a similar sized round watch? So, you know, this is something that me and you in both of our preferences go from round to rectangular, you know, watches a lot. So, you know, for me, a rectangular or square even, like we talked about the Santos earlier,
Of course.
you know, to me has a very different feel on the wrist than round. It just does. It doesn't sit the same way, depending on how big your round case is. If it's within the capacity of your wrist, you really don't feel it. But a rectangular watch, you do. So depending on the watch you're getting into, I think there's a noticeable difference. I wouldn't make the move without trying one on first.
Okay.
I think you would advise the same.
Yeah. I would say the real problem with non-round watches, especially one like a Reverso, is that they fit in such unconventional fashion. Trying to measure across the case will give you a ridiculously small dimension because they're narrow in the middle. They're lengthwise long. So you wind up trying to compare something that's listed at like 29 millimeters wide with a round watch that might be 43, 44 millimeters. So you're comparing a large watch to what's apparently a small watch. And then, like Niko said, the shape of the lugs is so important. And on something like a Reverso, where the lugs they tend to be drilled very high, the watch wears even bigger because now the strap's junction with the case is hiked up. And so everything changes when you start messing with the basic geometry of a watch. With a non-round watch, it's going to be whether or not it's flat. Is it flat as a board, or is it like this Hublot Spirit of Big Bang in every Richard Mille tonneau with a curved or cambered back? If it's flat as a board, it's going to stick out like a board if it's marginal for your wrist size. If it's curved, it's going to fit well. Where are the lugs drilled? Are they drilled high? What kind of strap or bracelet does it have? Does it want to flare out and fight you, or does it pull straight down around your wrist? The non-round watch introduces so many X factors, Niko, I think we can both agree on this, that you should only buy one, either new or pre-owned, from a company that gives you a no questions asked approval period.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's one thing that I always make sure to ask. One of my first questions is, okay, you're interested in a watch. Well, have you ever tried it on? And the main reason I ask for that, for that information is because of what we just talked about.
Yeah.
It's so important to know how a watch fits you before you like it. You could love it in pictures, love it on a wrist model, and it looks great, but it just doesn't feel right. And especially when you're going into square or non-round cases.
Yeah, and I found that a lot of Reversos wear so big that even if they're not sports watches, to me, they wear sports watch large. And I have the right wrist shape, maybe not size, but the right wrist shape for a broad board-shaped watch. My wrist is flat across the top, so if it's tough for me, it's going to be tough for you. Only take lug-to-lug measurements into account with non-round watches, and then try before you buy.
I saw, I'm interested in your opinion on this one. Fernando Sanchez says, Niko, what's your opinion on the Ulysses Nardin Freak Cruiser? Would you wear it over a Nautilus? And in my mind, my question is, what makes you consider that question, first of all?
Okay.
Second of all, I like the UN Freak Cruiser. I think it's a good-looking watch. I think my main question would be, where are you going that you're considering wearing it over the Nautilus? What is the setting of the day?
Let's clarify that though the Freak Cruiser is the first water-resistant Freak since 2001, 3ATM does not a sports watch make. It is sporty. It is not a dive. It's not a casual dive and snorkeling type watch the way a 5711 with 120 meters of water resistance can be. One of these can get wet and wild. The other, quite frankly, should stay high and dry. So what are you going to do with the watch?
Exactly. That's a key question. So, for me, if it's just a casual day and I'm not getting near any water, I just don't know how I could choose the UN over the Paddock. I just don't know.
So even for high and dry, you would go with the Paddock?
Yeah, look, if I have both of them in the watch box, am I going to certainly rotate them? Sure.
Okay.
But if I'm buying one or the other, I don't think it's a question. Just because of the fact that with one, you're getting the name and, the functionality.
Okay.
And, one, you're getting an iconic UN. It is iconic, I'll give it that. But you're not getting that same mystique, and you're also not getting the same functionality, and probably spending, if not identical numbers, maybe a little more.
So what you're saying then is that the Nautilus, being an all-time great for the industry, has a special position and a special appeal, whereas the Freak is a great UN, but it might not extend into the realm of the industry's icons.
Right.
It's definitely a milestone watch, especially the first Freak from 2001. That is an immortal, but it's an immortal nerd watch, whereas the 5711 is, part of the canon of a great watch collection. If you wanted to have a roadmap of the all-time milestone watches, the watershed watches. And we're talking Patek Philippe. It's not just an icon of the watch industry, it's an icon of Patek Philippe, which is overflowing with iconic references, and somehow the 5711 rises toward the top of that group. So I think if we weren't comparing a Nautilus to the Freak, the Freak would stand a better chance. I'm going to be the weird guy and say I love the Freak intellectually. I love the Freak for its technology. I love it because it's weird. But here's the other factor. The Freak wears huge.
Absolutely.
The Freak, other than the first one, which was 42.5, the Freak fights your wrist. It's got that strap that wants to flare out like a parachute. It's big from lug to lug, and the lugs are straight. So I'm not going to say it looks as weird as an IWC Big Pilot on my wrist, but we're getting there. It's a massive timepiece that can't be worn easily on a wrist, in my opinion, smaller than 17 centimeters. Can it be worn? Yes, but you better like your watch is big, and you better like your watch is loose. So I'm going to go with the Nautilus as well.
Yep, couldn't agree more.
Okay, so question coming in from Andrew Roberts. Tim, thoughts on the Reverso Grand Tie Latitude Blue Dial? Well, Andrew, this is a nice watch that, as you mentioned, comes in two versions. There is the blue dial with white accents, and then there is the silver dial with blue accents. Both versions are known as the Reverso Latitude. It's a very handsome watch. It's a traditional Reverso Grand Tie, so about 25.5 millimeters wide, 42 from lug to lug. It's a good size for an all-arounder. It does have the buff case back, traditional Reverso style, so if you wanted to have it engraved, if you wanted to have it lacquered or enameled at JLC, you could do that. But if you want a complication, I would say you're probably better off going straight for a Grand Tie Reverso Duo. Then you can have the dual time and you can have the same case size. The Latitude is great if you like your Reversos very traditional with a little splash of color. That's how I'd recommend. That's the kind of person who would take the Reverso Latitude. Now, I had another question from earlier about Reversos, and this was to the effect of what did I think of the Reverso Shadow from the 90s and why. Oh, here it is. David Hefkin asks. It's usually a lot cheaper for some reason. The reason is it's small. It's a very petite Reverso. So while it's attractive, Shadow, dark dial, two go together. But the problem is it is a very traditional Reverso, petite even by the standards of the Grand Tie. So it's going to be a hard sell for modern men. A lot of contemporary guys will say, if I'm going to buy a Reverso that small, I may as well just go out and get a vintage Reverso from the 30s and 40s because they're out there for reasonable prices. I'm not going to go diving with the watch or swimming with the watch or do anything rough. So anything I do with a Reverso Shadow, I do with a vintage Reverso. And again, why not just get the real thing vintage if you're going to get a watch, a Reverso, that small? Otherwise, there's so many other contemporary options for Reverso fans that a tiny, obscure, older Reverso from the 90s just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Good watch, though. Good watch. Other questions coming through. This is one, okay. Stamatiadis N asks, acknowledging your horological expertise, I don't claim expertise, but I'm an enthusiast and an amateur in the sense that I love the material. Niko is an expert.
Oh, please.
I would like to ask you two questions. Icebreaker, have you dressed your Mac with a clear film in order to avoid scratches? No, this is an old workhorse of a computer. This thing is my entertainment while I'm riding the bike on the rollers for like an hour and a half at maximum effort, reaching out while still balancing on the rollers, trying to skip through YouTube commercials. So this thing's been knocked over and battered and bruised more times than I can count. It's amazing that it still works. Thank you, Genius Bar. Otherwise, he has an impressive collection of 10 watches, Niko, and he says, now that you've seen what I've got, I would like to know what you would add to this collection at approximately 10,000 euro US stateside audiences. That's about 11,000 US dollars as of today, May 12th. So Niko, my answer is that he's got a pretty broad cross-section of watches, but rather than reading all 10 of them, let me give you the core. Actually, why don't I just read all 10 of them? IWC Aquatimer Chronograph 3767, Romain Jerome Titanic DNA Limited Edition, Rolex Datejust Steel 36mm 1971, Rolex Datejust Vintage 36mm 1950 Dauphine Hands, Rolex Explorer 2 2016, Zenith Dayfly Extreme Elite Power Reserve Bold, Panerai Luminor GMT PAM 88K Series, Raymond Weil Parsifal Chronograph 2009, Longines Flagship Chrono 1996, Breguet Marine GMT reference 5857. Now, what would you pick, Niko? 10,000 euros, new or pre-owned, how would you enhance this collection?
He's got a lot of diversity in there.
Yeah.
And for me, what that says is that, he's not afraid to wear something big. He's not afraid to wear something small.
Sure.
Functions, lack of functions. I mean, he's got pretty much everything covered there.
He's got Romain, Jerome, and Breguet.
Right,
in the
yeah,
same collection.
exactly. So my first answer was the Blanc Pond 50 Fathoms.
Yeah.
Get something iconic in there. He's got some great pieces already,
Yeah.
but throw something in there that's going to really be a statement. Maybe not a flagship of your collection, but something that's really going to add some flair. This is something that's going to be iconic. It's going to last forever. If you can find it at the right price, even probably a little bit under your budget.
Yeah, you'll have money left over buying that one pre-owned.
Exactly. Buying it pre-owned for sure. So, that was my first answer because of the fact that he's not afraid to wear big.
Yeah, so 45 millimeters, the 50 Fathoms, I gotta say, it wears small for a watch of its size. I can wear one. I don't know if I can wear it with panache, but I can wear it with security, and the proportion looks good because the lugs are short and they curve down tightly. Also, a fantastic movement, Niko. Automatic, 5 days. It's exclusive within this watch group to the 50 Fathoms. It is finished beautifully. The watch is solidly built. The sapphire cap on the bezel. I just love this. I love this suggestion.
Yeah. I mean, when we can agree, it's never a better day.
Yeah, and alongside the Rolex Submariner back in 53, 54, the 50 Fathoms and the Submariner established the look, the layout, and the conventions of what we call a dive watch today. So this is an all-timer. It's maybe not as famous among the general public as the Submariner, but among watch guys, the 50 Fathoms is one of those hardcore, almost like Nautilus level icons. It's a landmark watch.
Yeah, absolutely. What was your suggestion for him?
Okay, so my suggestion, I thought, first of all, like you, he's got room for another dive watch in there, but I tried to identify what the core of his collection is and then figure out what's missing from that core. So he has the Rolex Explorer 2 42 millimeter, so he also has the Breguet Marine GMT, and he has the Panerai PAM 88, so he's got robust coverage with dual times. He's got 3 substantial dual-time watches, and they're all great watches. They're heavy-duty pieces from reputable top-end brands. Now, he also has a substantial chronograph in the IWC Aquatimer 3767. So he's got a dive chronograph, but like you, I felt there was room here for a pure dive watch, something that you could wear with a business suit or a bathing suit, and keeping the budget in mind, I found a way to give him a big discount on his 10,000 euros. Pita Barcelona, the Steam dive watch from an AHCI Master. This is a timepiece you can buy for 5,275 euro, 41 millimeters. It's a combination of a ETA base caliber elaborated with an extraordinary geared magnetic setting system and a bronze case that is just scintillating. It's even got a little splash of color on the dial that gives me flashbacks to Elaine Silberstein. And with the independent horology angle from a brand that makes 100 watches a year, where you actually get to customize the whole watch by request. To me, this is about as much fun as you can have with high horology below 6,000 euro. Plus, like I said, at 41 millimeters, it's an aggressive diver, but it's not so big that you couldn't wear it with a suit in a straight face. Okay, plus, if you want to know your watchmaker by his first name, obviously Ancieto Jimenez, you're going to have a lot of fun with this gentleman customizing your watch. Just be ready to wait for it because he's going to make it by hand. So now, Niko, you had another suggestion from the Panerai perspective. You found a way to round out his collection with his PAM 88. You've also suggested what?
The PAM 339.
Okay.
And what I found really great about this piece is you're looking at a 2010 special edition, limited to, I think it was 1,500 pieces. You're getting a Panerai movement that's an 8-day power reserve, so it's going to be something that's got a lot of function to it.
And it's the in-house caliber.
And it is the in-house, so that's an added benefit too. So kind of what I tried to really, define your collection with was, iconic pieces, stuff that are going to be, confident additions to what is already a pretty, satisfied collection.
Yeah.
So, a watch like this is going to be big, 47 millimeter.
Plus now he'll have a radiometer.
Right. Plus now he'll have a radiometer, so he's rounding out that collection as well. So I think this is a great all-around watch to just hit a lot of check marks, on the boxes of your collection. So, this is something that I would really consider along with Tim and, my first selection, which was the Blanc Pond.
Yeah, I have to say both of these are great bedrock watches. It is the Marina Militaire dial, tobacco dial, beautiful combination of dial and watch, and it does have the ceramized aluminum case.
Yes.
So I guess this makes it effectively as scratch resistant as ceramic, but you don't have to worry about a lug fracturing off like the full ceramic Panerai cases. Plus, it is the caliber 2002, which I love because along with the 2003, this was the first generation of Panerai in-house caliber, and the 2000 series movements are so over-engineered. They went way too far into the deep end in terms of engineering refinements. Not a cheap movement to make, but a supremely satisfying one to own. Niko, thank you so much for your contributions, your insights. I really appreciate what you brought to the show tonight, and thank you for fielding so many questions out of our live chat.
Yeah, guys, I'm always glad to be here. Remember, follow the other channels. Tim's hand reviews are back. As far as the questions out of the chat, I always try and get to them. So does Tim. Fed gets a lot of emails too. We're going to answer as many as we can. And, questions like we just answered about what would you add to our collection, we're going to do that on Mondays. So, keep them coming.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. So, Tim's Watch You Want Watch Reviews. Subscribe to my new channel, please. You're going to love it. A lot of fun. Thank you to Fed, who's been manning the live chat, Raph, who's been manning the switcher, Niko for joining me tonight. I'm Tim. This is Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on.